And we're live.
Yep.
Welcome to Project Ion Podcast. We're live from Northwest Iowa. It's Saturday, January 26, 2019. My name's Kevin. My voice is horrible, but I'm here. I'm joined by Adam Forsyth and Jimmy Rosendahl. And smaller crew today, but we're excited to get back in the saddle here. Big developments online related to the podcast. We have a website. I'm not sure if I'd tell anybody to go there or not, but it's projectionpodcast.home.blog. And it's basically where we put up some past recordings. There's only a few up there now, kind of releasing them in phases, just to not tax the system too much. Also, big news, we've been approved on iTunes. So
awesome.
Yeah, go on the iTunes podcast directory, search Project Ion Podcast, and subscribe to your heart's content. That's exciting. We are on YouTube, obviously. If you're watching us now, that's where you are. And you can just search Project Ion Podcast in YouTube. And anytime we're live, we'll show up. Email us at projectionpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you're triggered, let us know.
That'll be today.
Yeah, sure. Or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, we're accepting resumes for that as well.
Yes.
We also accept sponsorships for a very reasonable price.
Yep.
Speaking of sponsors, today's episode is brought to you by Shep's PC Repair, Northwest Iowa's premier home and small business PC repair service, featuring virus and spyware removal, general troubleshooting, data backups, and so much more. Check out shepspcrepair.com for more information. What's up, boys?
Oh, not too much. How you doing?
How are you doing, Kevy?
Good.
Good.
I think that intro is a little better than the last
That was
one.
a great intro, man.
That was the first time we had an intro
Sweet.
since I've been on the podcast.
Yeah, we're stepping up our game.
We're
Man.
Absolutely.
We've got a dedicated webcam besides the one just on my computer. We've got an extra monitor so these guys can see stuff that's going on. We've got speakers now so people can hear things.
Hearing's good.
Yep. So it's coming together. We're maybe getting into the ballpark where we can like fake like we know what we're doing almost.
Sweet.
But
Rogan,
Fake
watch
it till
out.
you make it. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, we don't have anywhere near enough weed for that.
That is true. Yes, indeed.
Not yet, Iowa legislature.
yeah.
No DMT here.
Well, I think that the floodgates are open on that subject. You know?
Absolutely.
I mean,
You take a look at Minnesota with the last election swung, very heavily Democratic, and I know that they were pushing before their previous governor went out of office, and so the new governor of Minnesota, I'm sure, is in favor of it. So he's the one that was the coach at Mankato State University back when it was Mankato State University.
mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing within the next year and a half or two, our neighbors to the north will be blazing up.
Yep. Yeah.
And we're just 15
Not that I'm an
minutes
expert on that topic by any stretch.
Well, I mean, it gets to be a little bit of a tough sell, where like, okay, but over some arbitrary border, then you're doing 25 years in prison,
Yeah.
and then somewhere else it's perfectly legal recreationally. You know what I mean? So it's it's hard for me to imagine that they'll be able to continue having things criminalized at least in all 50 states.
And you take a look at Michigan and our state, at our nation's capital, Washington D.C. You can smoke. There are a lot of other states that are they're just dominoes that are falling one at a time. So it's going to be a matter of time before all the states have it legalized and the federal government's behind like they are on everything.
Yeah. Right. Well, and then I wonder how are we going to be able to address the problem of like the DUI with marijuana, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they have the breathalyzer for
Well,
booze, of course, and
but I know this is your territory, so I'm going to ask you a question, Jim. So I know that they have a number of tests that they can run outside of just a breathalyzer to verify if somebody is too inebriated, whether it's on alcohol, cough medication. I know that you can get a driving under the influence if you are tired at the wheel. Can't they just use all of those tests to see if somebody is too stoned to drive, or do they just pull the guy over who's going 5 miles an hour on the interstate and go, well, you're probably stoned, buddy?
yeah, I mean, I would think that would be the most efficient way
Yeah.
to approach something like that, is try to use what's already there. And I mean, we live in a world of practicality to at least some degree rather than strictly theory. So, I mean, I would think that with training in that, officers would be able to tell if somebody You know, you roll down the window and it's like Cheech and Chong episode, something like that.
I don't know many people when they're stoned who'd want to get up and drive. I mean, do you
right.
want to go drive when you're stoned, Jimmy?
Then there's the edible issue too. I mean,
Well,
the smell. So
That's true. And then the vape, isn't that a thing too? Or
Yep.
you can do cannabis oil
I would
and
think so.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
now that'll be interesting to see what happens the next 5 years. I'm sure I will be one of the last because of its legislature now. But I'm sure that it's going to be everywhere soon.
Well, anything controversial happened recently?
Yeah.
At all?
We could do some breaking news.
Breaking news. So I've been following to some degree this whole Covington High School student thing where they were basically attending a pro-life march.
Yeah.
Which incidentally and interestingly doesn't get a whole lot of coverage by the mainstream media, at least based on my experience in the past and watching cable news. But anyway, have you guys heard of this? Are you aware of the situation?
I'm aware of it. I've intentionally ignored it because I'm
you.
so sick of this political climate. You can't believe half the shit that you hear on TV So.
And that's, if we've learned anything, it's that context matters. There was a clip or a picture, something that was released of a white male student wearing a Make America Great Again hat, sort of smirking, kind of smiling smugly in the face of a Native American man who was beating a drum in his face. And there were, a few minutes of a clip or a video released surrounding this. And of course, CNN, other mainstream outlets jumped to the conclusion that this kid was making fun of Native American culture, making fun of this Native elder. And it turns out that a day or two went by, and there was a whole other 2-hour video surrounding this short clip that was released that gives a whole nother perspective on what happened that day. And it turns out that, the kids were probably being fairly stupid and maybe mocking people like they shouldn't have, but those kids were, at least based on my viewing, those kids had been targeted by other people too. So it wasn't all one-sided. It was very a back and forth type of scenario. There's a clip here. I don't know how much of it we'll watch.
You want to play the video?
Yeah, it could give some perspective.
Let me switch over to full screen mode quick. Sorry, I've got hotkeys for this, so I should know what I'm doing, but I don't. Here we go.
On Friday, January 18th, 3 groups of people converged on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. A small gathering of black Hebrew Israelites, a religious activist group that believes African Americans are God's chosen people, students from Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky for the March for Life, and people attending the Indigenous Peoples March. A video showing a confrontation between the high school students, including junior Nick Sandman, and an Omaha elder Nathan Phillips went viral and sparked outrage. Phillips told the Post his version of the incident on the afternoon of January 20th. Later that evening, Sandman released a public statement giving his account.
Quick here, boys.
I don't. With my microphone, if I had an elder Native American banging a drum in my face and singing, I would be awed. I would probably be smiling too.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like he is smirking in some condescending fashion. He looks like he's maybe doesn't know how to react, and so he's just smiling.
And that'd be my question to you guys. How would you react in this situation if I was being and by the way, these kids they were having racial slurs shouted at them by the Hebrew Israelites, the video mentioned. And so there were 3 groups involved. That's what was initially lost in this whole thing. It looked like it was this group of white males against this group of Native Americans, when that is not the case. There were 3 groups involved, and it was highly racially charged. And with all of that stuff being spouted off at me, if I was in the face of this dude who's beating a drum at me, I don't know how I'd respond. I give props and kudos to this kid for keeping his cool and just kind of acting as chill as he did. Good for him. And I'm sure in the background you can see some of the other students kind of maybe doing some things they shouldn't have, or
typical kids.
Exactly, kids.
They're being typical kids.
Yeah. And these kids, there were calls on Twitter for these kids to be doxxed, which is basically making your information public, your name, your address, phone number, all that stuff, from celebrities and people on Twitter with the blue check mark, and calls for violence against them. They were getting death threats. all because of a short clip that was taken very much out of context. And that's where we are with mainstream media these days.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you see all the people with cameras and so forth, right? How did the people that initially reported on this, how do they think they're going to get away with showing just a sliver of it and then kind of spinning it in whatever way that they desired?
Exactly.
Without consequence. I mean,
there's a comment going around on Instagram and I'm sure Twitter. I don't tweet anymore, and Facebook. And the comment is, back in the day, our mainstream media used to tell us what happened, and we would decide how to feel. And now our mainstream media is telling us how to feel, and we have to decide what happened.
Right.
While it's gradually been getting worse the last, I would say decade, I would say that, the last 2 years since Mega and Antifa and, how pretty much every single cable news outlet is run by, well, I'm not going to say that because I'm going to get whiplash. Heavily favors the left. You can't hear the truth. You can't watch the news and expect to hear facts. And that's just the world that we live in now, as opposed to the world that we lived in the late 80s and the 90s when the Berlin Wall was coming down and we were wrapping up a Cold War, and it was the same way with the last well, I don't know if they call it a war or a conflict that we had. We're not hearing the facts. We're being told how to feel about it, and we have to try to decide for ourselves, okay, what is the truth? Because I'm not getting it from the news.
Yeah, like, how do you guys go about that? Do you try to pull news from as many sources as you can, and then sort of come to your own conclusion? Or?
Usually non-mainstream, and I was thinking about why this change happened that you were describing on the way over here. I was like, what is going on to cause this shift? And I think it's because of the wide availability of alternative outlets these days, and the competition for breaking the news story is so fierce and so ramped up that to some extent facts don't matter anymore. We're going to report on something and give our spin on it regardless of the truth of the matter, and then correct it later. It's easier to break something and then correct it later and say you're sorry, we might have gotten it wrong, than to do your diligence first, as you should as a journalist up front. And so, to get my news, where do I get it? As many different places as I can.
Breaking news. Pearl Harbor was bombed. Breaking news. JFK was assassinated. Breaking news. Ronald Reagan was shot. I mean, that's breaking news.
Yes. Yeah.
That's holy shit, something's really happening. But when 5 times a day you're watching CNN and go, breaking news. Somebody else is saying something bad about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you know what? I just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, not in America. I don't get my news from American sources. Mm-hmm. I will take a look at the BBC, although they do slant a little to the left. The Economist, which also slants a little bit to the left, tends to be more along the lines of factual. I used to listen to NPR news, but NPR spends so much more time with editorializing the news from a leftist slant, and I'm not. I want to first and foremost say I'm not bashing the left in general. There are a lot of opinions that I have that fall on that side of the spectrum in regards to homosexuality and gay marriage and host of other social issues. I am liberal in that standpoint, but I don't like the fact that every single piece of news that we get from an American source is slanted one way or the other. There's no Walter Cronkites anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've mentioned this before different times, but I don't have a problem if somebody says this is opinion journalism or this is an editorial type thing, and then blah, 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 blah.
But let's keep it on the editorial page.
Right, yeah, exactly. Don't masquerade as objective journalism, but then you're just really what you really are is just a shill for partisan politics, And it's everywhere. It's so ubiquitous anymore that.
Well, and we're coming up with facts to support our opinions. well, I say that as I'm a journalist, but I'm not. Journalists are coming up with facts to support their opinions, their preconceived notions. Okay, I think Trump's an asshole, so I'm going to find every fact that I can that makes him look even more of an asshole. And they do that with everything. And that's not just the liberal media, that's Fox News as well. They do the exact same thing, just on the other side of the spectrum, and it's disgusting to listen to.
Yeah. We pulled up that news bias chart thingy or whatever it was. Yeah.
Which was biased, I think. When I looked at that news chart, I'm like, yeah, no. I get The Economist. I know that they're not in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And NPR, too, I think, was pretty centrist according to that chart.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Maybe compared to CNN they are, but if you actually listen to NPR and stuff, you can hear it.
Well, yeah.
And it's the subtleties, too, like stuff that I think people usually don't pick up on. Like, I was listening to NPR the other day. Said something like, Trump slammed so-and-so for this and that. Like, why do you have to say slammed in there? That's in my opinion, editorializing on it. Why can't you just say Trump said this? No, Trump slammed him for this or that. It's that little nuance that people, I don't think they pick up on it, but I think it still kind of infects your subconscious.
Right.
And makes you think or feel a certain way.
Well, it's persuasive language.
Yes.
It's designed to make you elicit certain thoughts or have a reaction to it.
Yeah, like leading questions.
Yeah.
It's all the same,
right.
The same category.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this too, and it's like with all of the stuff surrounding fake news these days, Trump's always calling somebody fake news. Like, as a media outlet, wouldn't you want to make double sure and be super careful about what you're putting out there and making sure that you are doing your research first and getting the whole story before you report on something so you're not accused of this? Like, what are you people thinking?
Yeah.
People are calling you fake news for a reason, and this is why. This is an example why.
Yeah, I mean, let's switch back to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Switch back to this. This Covington story, this is like a non-story to me. I mean, like, what happened here that was that significant? I mean, kids were like waiting for the bus, and then somebody yelled at them, and then a guy got in their face. And,
this isn't like what happened on the campus in Ohio in the 1970s. But the news blows it up.
The story isn't the stuff that happened. It's like the fallout from the thing that happened, right? I mean, that's really where the story is. So
the story is how the story is told.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, why even report on this at all? Like, how did it even arrive at a spot where they're gonna? And I mean, I
might be able to answer. Like, in my opinion, I think it's because these kids were at a pro-life rally, or as the mainstream would say, an anti-choice rally or something like that. They'll spin it to make it anti-something instead of what they say, pro-something. And they all had red hats on. Like, that's probably why it's as big as it is, because according to some Catholic conservative, red hat equals racist. And that's like what all of our news reporting is about these days, is race, and identity politics.
I saw. So do you guys think the MAGA hat thing is like a racist symbol?
I've got one.
I've got a MAGA hat in my car right now. I almost wore it in today to spur a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't. I think that's all bullshit that was perpetrated by the media, because when I almost called him Obama. My God, that would be a sin. When Trump wanted to start building the border walls, well, you want to build a border wall because you're a racist and you don't like Mexicans. No, I want to build the border wall because right now you can walk across it as many times as you damn well please. I've done it personally down in Texas, and it's not secure. There's no other country that is as civilized as ours that does not have border security. And we don't on the South. We have guys in green uniforms that drive around and stop cars and say, hey, do you have any illegal aliens in the back? Nope. Okay, go about your day. Not to downplay what they do, because I know they put themselves in hairy situations all the time, but I'm just kind of being an asshole. But he was immediately labeled a racist, and there were a bunch of other things that he was immediately labeled a racist for.
Well, the Muslim ban. As if Islam is a race. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, that's a good point too. When we talk about Islam and Islamic extremism, Trump did make a couple off the cuff remarks, which he is famously known for making stupid remarks to try to work up a crowd, and right after that, he tried to pass a ban on countries from people who came from 6 select places that were in the middle of extremist religious conflict. And, saying, hey, I don't want to invite that kind of mentality into our country. Let's ban people from those countries until they have their stuff together. Right. That was immediately labeled racist because of some stupid remarks. So I will be the first to say that, Trump does bring on a little bit of this himself. Mm-hmm. But I think that saying everybody who supported Trump and everybody who has a MAGA hat and everybody who feels like we need border security is racist is complete garbage.
Yeah, I'm looking for it right now. I saw a meme or something that somebody posted the other day that was, it was essentially...
I didn't mean to interrupt you, by the way.
Like a whole bunch of all the different people with MAGA hats on, right? And like one of them was, the guy's name was like Matthew Heimbach, who I've heard of, who's like a traditionalist Workers' Party guy that was basically a Nazi. Alt-right people... whole big list of them. They're all wearing MAGA hats, and the connection was like, so can you really say that the MAGA hat is not a racist symbol based on all these people who tie their wagon to it? Essentially, was like the connection that you're supposed to make.
Yeah, then let's make the counter argument. So I'm going to say that every liberal is a tree hugger who hates commerce, hates business, hates everybody who has money. They're baby killers. It's completely ridiculous. Taking that stereotype to that degree is so damaging.
I always boil it down into the most ridiculous case ever. That's like saying, well, I don't know, Hitler had blue eyes. That makes all blue-eyed people racist. It's that dumb of an argument to me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I think that it would be, remiss to say that there isn't a constituency of people out there that feel that way about the MAGA hat, though. I mean,
well, there is.
Yeah,
but it was all brought on by the news. The news created that.
Yeah. Flesh that out for me a little, so that they just drum the idea so much that MAGA hat equals.
Yeah. Do you remember? Do you remember the way that they, the way that they reported on the news during the election year? Trump is always wearing his red hat. Hey, let's make America great again. This is the way we want to do it. And when everything that he says is spun to be from a racial standpoint, that's all you saw in every news outlet for months and months and months. And, these people who are being spoon-fed the information that these news organizations want to spoon-feed them, because they're not spoon-feeding them everything. They're just giving them, what they want to hear. When you hear that over and over and over and over and over again, some people are dumb enough to believe it.
Yeah.
That they're not realizing that they're essentially being brainwashed into believing, okay, if somebody is wearing a MAGA hat, they want to immediately lynch every black person they see. They want to, get rid of everybody who's not a blue-eyed, blonde-haired American, and call it a day. That was 100% created by our media.
Yeah. Well, do you guys think then that, I mean, to me at least, the TV news is dying on the vine. I don't think people under 40 pay a whole lot of attention to like the 6 o'clock news.
Well, local news, I don't know.
Yeah,
it is the most trusted news source right now. Though in America, is your local 6 o'clock news is your most trusted news source.
Well, I guess what I mean,
but you're talking about your CNN, your
I'm talking about like the CBS nightly news program or ABC. How the major networks, CNN. I never watch.
Well, no, I'm too busy binging Netflix.
Yeah,
as is every other person my age and all the millennials younger.
Well, and then. You get so much news from whatever, social media, from just the phone, regular
that damn thing,
internet. Yeah,
well, it's gone. But speaking of phones on the floor, you take a look at your Apple News app. You didn't have to get that, thank you. And on our phones, how many hundreds of millions of Americans have Apple News, and that's where they get their news from. And what you're seeing on the news is all it's news that Apple wants to bring you, which is a very, very liberal corporation.
Yeah.
I know. I worked there for 5 years. I still love their product, but I don't like how they're shoving the politics that they want us to hear down our throats.
And that scares me too when I think about how they banned, the Alex Jones show, InfoWars, from their podcast directory. You can still subscribe to InfoWars from iTunes, but you can't search for it in their directory. And that's like obviously them taking a stance on what news they're allowing and what they are not. And that kind of scares me a little bit. It's like they make the claim that he was promoting hate speech or something, yet I couldn't give you any specific examples, but there are lots of podcasts out there that I'm sure are much more hateful than his show and that go way beyond anything he's ever said, anecdotally.
In the comment of hate speech,
Yeah,
makes me. I lived in Madison, Wisconsin for a time, which is essentially the Midwest campus of Berkeley, and I've never been around more hate and more vitriol than I had in Madison. And they perpetrate anybody who is central or leans to the right as somebody who hates and somebody who again is a racist. But the most hate speech I ever hear comes out of the mouths of people pressing a liberal agenda.
And I would agree with you, and I've been afraid to say that because I'm trying to make sure that I'm not like in an echo chamber or something, or making sure that I'm seeing all sides of the story there. But yeah, in general, I would agree with that statement. And yeah, Roger Stone. Hello, Mr. Stone. What do you got there, Jimmy?
Oh yeah, let me switch over to.
Very good.
So my cousin is involved with this place called Knowhere News. I think we've talked about this a little bit before.
Yep.
But the idea, it's a website that does news with an algorithm, and it, like some of that semantics that you were talking about, the issue with persuasive wording of things and some of that, like the idea is to try to filter out the garbage that, the human input adds to it. And so they do the story, and then they show you the sources that they pulled it from and to like what extent. And we'll do this Roger Stone one here. So as you scroll down through it, I won't take time to read it here, but I'll just give you the idea. And then you can see the sources here. So they pulled from Breitbart, a lot from Mercury News, a little from CNBC.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, and then think you're missing. And I thought they had a thing where you could like rate it too, but maybe. Here, give your own bias score. So
oh wow,
that's kind of rad.
Trying
like,
to be,
they're doing everything they can to try to take out the fluff.
That's rare.
That's so needed today too.
Well, I think there's a market for it, and I don't know how if it's just I think it's just a regular website. Like I don't know if you have to pay to be involved, or if they give you a certain amount of free ones.
That's
something.
interesting.
But, yeah,
that's very interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Yep, it's Knowhere, KNOW.
Maybe we should put a link to that in our notes.
Yeah, I could
podcast.
Add it to the description for sure. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then you can look in the description of the episode, and it should be. I'll put a link down there so anybody can check it out.
All right, so links to follow.
Yes. Working on our show notes too. That's all good. We want to put like links to our email address and website and all that good stuff in the show notes in the iTunes directory too.
Well, I was going to ask you guys. You were talking about Apple News. Being like the Apple Corporation is got a liberal slant to it. But what about? So can we make the argument? Well, it's a corporation, they get to run it however they want to. I would think there'd be sort of a libertarian argument in there, like, well, they get to run their business however they want to. And
well, you're right.
Let the market decide. If you think it sucks that much, take your business elsewhere.
Yep. I have some experience with this, just being in the field that I'm in. And one of the things I'm kind of working on behind the scenes here is this notion of are like the big tech companies censoring conservative viewpoints, but that's for another show. But anyway, so if you say like, what is Google filtering out conservatives from its search results? It's hard to say because there's so many factors that are built into how Google ranks things and stuff like that, and nobody really knows how all that works except for Google. They put out suggestions and things for like, it's almost like black magic. I forget where I was going. Anyway, what I've tried to do was get myself away from the Googles because they collect so much information about you. It's ridiculous. And so I try to use things like DuckDuckGo.com. If you guys have heard of that, it's a search engine that says they don't collect any information about you or record your searches. But the search just isn't as good. The results just aren't as good as if you were using Google. So if it's stuff like finding addresses, finding phone numbers, I will use Google. But for just general stuff, I use this DuckDuckGo, and it's just not as good, unfortunately. And so it becomes like, is Facebook, is Google, or is YouTube, are all those utilities, like, should they be required by law to be impartial, or are they private companies that can do whatever they want to?
Yeah, I guess the fact of the matter is, despite what they're doing and despite how much they permeate every facet of our culture, our technology and how we live our day-to-day lives, they are all private companies.
Yeah.
And, Apple, they absolutely have a right to blast whatever kind of garbage they want to on my Apple News feed. But the problem is that, again, so many people use it. And so when you have hundreds of millions of people in the United States that have an iPhone, maybe hundreds of millions, maybe 70 or 80 million people in the U.S. that have an iPhone, and they're all getting their news from that source. How many of those people look at that but don't realize what they're being spoon-fed? That's a scary thing. Now, YouTube can filter out whatever the hell they want. So can Facebook. So can Twitter. So can, pretty much any private company that you are utilizing your technology through. That's their right. That's their terms and conditions when you sign on the dotted line with your clicking OK. Is it right? No. Is it against the law? No. Is it destroying our culture? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to add that I think, yes, all that's true. And I would like to have those companies be very upfront about what they're doing, if they are in fact doing this, so that people know what they're getting themselves into. I think just informing the consumer of these services is very important. Because people think that they are getting unbiased, unfiltered results. When it seems like they're not. I don't know for sure. That's something I'm working on.
Yeah, but even if the large companies are spoon feeding this stuff down our throats, the truth of the matter is, you take a look at Desert Storm. Everybody watched Desert Storm on CNN. Desert Storm or CNN rather, gave you facts. This is what's happening. This is when it's happening. This is where it's happening. This is what the responses from the Iraqis. This is what the Kuwaitis are doing. This is what the U.S. is doing. This is what we can tell you right now. It was all fact, and the news sources themselves have slanted so much. I mean, it's hard to know who to point the finger at because there are a lot of places you can.
Yeah, I was gonna on the subject of how businesses get to conduct their own business. I wonder, so, okay, if you look at Google in a vacuum, or you look at YouTube in a vacuum, something like that, okay, yeah, you talk about how they're able to do whatever they want to do within their own sphere of operation, but like with the Alex Jones thing that you were talking about earlier, I think the facts are, didn't Alex Jones get deplatformed on like everything all in a short time frame?
Yep.
So he was off YouTube, he was off Apple.
It started with Spotify and Stitcher, and once he was off of that, Apple got wind of it, and they in my opinion, Apple really started the dominoes falling for Alex Jones, because after he was off of Apple, then it was YouTube and Facebook, and eventually Twitter. Twitter kind of drug their feet a little bit on that, but eventually they followed in lock and step with the rest of them, after a lot of pressure being put on Jack Dorsey by the other companies and other users of the platform. And yeah, so he's gone from there as well. The funny thing, maybe the ironic thing, is that I still see ads for InfoWars appear in my Facebook feed. So they kicked him off, but he can still pay Facebook to advertise his products on there.
That's a perfect deal.
Yeah, and then the advertisement comments will be Alex Jones saying something.
Well, okay. How would you respond to people that are sort of apathetic about the Alex? I mean, because I think it's fair to say that Alex Jones is as much entertainment as he is, news or whatever. I mean, he talks about like interdimensional child molesters and lizard people and all kinds of crazy stuff that is just to me is just for entertainment only.
My official position on Alex Jones is I think he's certifiably insane, but I think a lot of what his network puts out there is good stuff, even amongst the bad stuff. Like, he does have some interesting, news and stories and facts and stuff. But yeah, most of his going on is entertaining. Nothing else.
Well, yeah. So what I was going to say was, if he is, I mean, if that's really what he is, and they deplatformed him, like, people would be just apathetic about it. Like, well, so what? I mean, if you make Alex Jones the hill that you die on, you know what I mean? Like, is it sort of jumping the gun?
I think people are worried that that's where it starts, and then where's it going to end?
Yeah,
like, it starts with Alex Jones being deplatformed, and then where does it go from there?
That's my concern. That's my concern.
Who's next?
Well, I mean, I think there is a case to be made on the Patreon thing. You guys are familiar with Patreon?
Yep.
So I've supported a few podcasts that way.
Yeah, I mean, the Patreon thing to me is really scary because, so for like, if it's an independent creator that you like to support, say, for example, Adam, and they're not putting out anything, or whatever they're putting out is, what is being voted for by their audience with their money, essentially. They're not adherent to some shill or something like that, or a corporate overlord or whatever. To pull the rug out from under those people and take away their income.
Well, but Patreon, Patreon is a private company, and that's, you sign terms and conditions, and somewhere in that black print is going to say, we have the right to pull your shit at any time for any reason whatsoever. There's not a damn thing you can do about it. Click OK and continue.
And people use. Sorry.
No, I'm done.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, people use it because it's easy.
Yeah.
Like, if I was seriously trying to raise money and I had some means of technically of setting it all up myself, I would do it myself. I'd accept donations myself from my own website or whatever, just through straight up credit card transactions. But again, Patreon is so simple to use, anybody can do it, and so they do, and then they wrapped into this terms of service stuff.
And it functions like a trust account, sort of like, somebody pays an account and then they shave a little off the top and then they make a payout. Yeah. And you're right, they're able to do whatever they want to, but when people are getting, their livelihoods taken away from them, subjectively.
Then again, they're subject to it's the South Park Human Centipede show. Have you seen that? The
centipede.
You have the Apple Human Centipede. Nobody reads the terms and conditions. That was Steve Jobs' thing. Read the terms and conditions. I can do whatever the hell I want to you people because you're not reading the terms and conditions, and nobody does. And so, you know what? I know they're losing their livelihood, but shit, it's their responsibility to know what they're signing up for.
Right. Well, I think there's a distinction with the Patreon thing because I think people have tried to do Patreon type make competition. Yeah. But for whatever reason, like the payment processing, they aren't able to horse them into it. I can't really articulate this, but Patreon essentially, from what it sounds like to me, has sort of got a lock on the way that the payment processing works, such that other people aren't able to crack into the marketplace and compete with them. And to me, I mean, now we're talking about how is this any different than like the good old days when somebody owned the factory and then they owned the steel mill and they owned every link in the chain and you sold to the company.
I would have a hard time finding that you couldn't work something out with PayPal to facilitate that.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean,
that's over my head, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, I follow a few YouTubers that have been deplatformed by Patreon.
Are you talking Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, Jordan Peterson would be one of them, but there's another guy I like called Matt Christensen.
Okay.
And he's they both had the rug pulled out from under them on that, and they've tried to set up like a website to compete, same sort of deal as the Patreon thing. and they've run into all these logistical problems with figuring out how to actually process the payment. Yeah. And when people aren't able to crack in, I mean, the free market's great, but when somebody else can't crack into the marketplace, it doesn't work. So.
Except you, YouTube. We love you and see the green backdrop. We love trees. We love nature. We're very green people.
Eco-friendly.
We're eco-friendly. We're all liberals here.
Yeah. We play nice. We don't try to rock the boat.
That's right.
At all.
Well, if somebody pays us enough, I'll say whatever I have to. I can definitely be bought.
We're in the back pockets of Shep's PC repair.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, man.
Do you want to go back to the Indian guy thing again?
I'm
move
good
on.
with it.
Yeah, I think
we beat that horse to death.
we
we don't need to kick it too.
Did you have something else, Cavi?
I kind of did. We basically hit on it with this discussion of the deplatforming, which is kind of where I was going with my other topic of discussion.
We were talking about 5G.
Yeah, 5G.
Oh, yeah, 5G.
Like this. So I've been trying to formulate my own conspiracy theory because I think they're interesting, and I like to see how kind of thoughts flow from one end to the other. And so 5G. Where do I begin with this?
So let's tell people what 5G is for the 5 people watching. So 5G is essentially G stands for generation, and we're talking about cellular signal and the frequencies at which cellular signal can be transmitted. And when you use various frequencies, you're able to use different speeds. So when we make the migration from 4G and LTE to 5G, what we're doing is we're running at a higher frequency, which allows us to move data much, much faster. So, you can download a full-length feature film in a couple of seconds. We're talking about like 10 gig download speeds, which is incredible. There are a couple, and they're not really downsides. They're just kind of matter of fact when we're talking about using these kinds of frequencies at cellular. When you use a higher frequency, and that's what this 5th generation is, you have to have much, 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 much higher tower density because those higher frequencies are not able to penetrate as well. And so when we're taking a look at, putting 5G in places like Esterville, Iowa, that will never happen because the tower density, you have to have, it's like a tower or a relay site every like several hundred yards. And so in places like New York City, Sioux Falls is one of the first ones that wants to push that through with Verizon, where there is a lot of infrastructure already. There's a lot of stuff in place. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be built in order for 5G to work. But in places that are going to have 5G, it's going to be world changing. The reason that's important, and the reason that's important that we have these higher speeds, look at how much more connected we are now than ever at any point in our time.
Yep.
You compare to how much the internet connectivity plays a part of your life now as opposed to like the 1980s. I mean, that's the difference that we're talking about between now and 10 years from now. The projection is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20.8 billion with a B, 20.8 billion connected devices by 2020. And we have to have some kind of a cellular infrastructure for all this stuff to work. Now, so it's not like people are buying that many iPhones and iPads, but everything that we use is connected. Take a look at companies with their point of sale. Every credit card transaction now, because of compliance issues, has to maintain connectivity to the internet. When you go to your doctor's office, everything is cloud-based. They can't dispense or prescribe medication unless they are wired and unless they're connected to, the patient-based cloud. The refrigerator at Wells Blue Bunny and all of their storage facilities, they're all managed by a central hub, and everything runs on, through the internet. Now, along those lines, you may think, okay, well, we have Cox, we have cable, we have MediaCom, we have all this stuff, we have all of these hard wires, but how many times can you think of in the last 30 days has your internet gone out for some reason or another? It'll go out for no reason at all. It will go out because, well, CenturyLink, if you recall, was it CenturyLink that had that massive outage about 3 or 4 weeks ago? There was one bad network card in Colorado, and people across the United States didn't have connectivity. So a lot of people are trying to make the migration from hard wires, which can be cut by some drunk guy with a postal digger on the street, to cellular. And so that's one of the reasons why it's such big news that 5G is coming down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Did I overtalk there a little bit? It's just kind of a wheelhouse of mine.
I appreciate the background on the 5G stuff. That's interesting. Yeah. And one of the things that people are talking about, at least that I've been kind of looking at, is the health and safety aspects of it. With the denser towers or whatever you call them, the more radiation or whatever we're being exposed to, and there's health issues that people are worried about, including, by the way, Alex Jones. He went off on the safety of 5G to a massive degree. He had entire rants on YouTube about the dangers of this stuff. So I'm going to kind of jump from there over to the fact that the sale of Apple phones has stagnated. People aren't buying. They don't need to buy as many new phones and mobile devices as they once did.
Because they're not making. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have my own feelings about that. Yeah, I mean the last improvement. Let's talk about the iPhone 10, which is not the iPhone X. It's the iPhone 10. We were railed on this when I worked for Apple.
It's alphabet soup.
So how many? $200 more for the silly features that were added to your phone, the ability to make your face look like a cat when you're FaceTiming somebody. I mean, that was their big freaking upgrade.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one reason for that. But sorry, go ahead.
No, people aren't upgrading because they don't have to. My phone is like 3 versions old, and it's fine. It works great for what I need it to do. So they're not selling as many phones as they need to. Guess how many phones right now support 5G? Like none. You can't get on a 5G network with your current mobile device. So that means that essentially once 5G rolls around, all of our phones are going to be obsolete. So Apple is going to be selling a crap ton of more phones once 5G comes online. Alex Jones is telling everybody why 5G is bad. What platform banned Alex Jones initially to get the ball rolling for the rest of the platforms? Apple. There's my conspiracy. Apple banned Alex Jones because he hates 5G, and Apple needs 5G to sell more iPhones. I'm not saying I believe this, but it was fun to connect the dots. Thoughts?
Yeah.
When you're scared of a guy who talks about aliens ruining your product, I think that's a whole other level of paranoia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any insider information about that. That's just an interesting connect the dots there.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I think that one thing that 5G is going to do is it's going to free up the cellular systems a lot more. So the traffic that can run that fast will run that fast, and everybody else who's on just a regular old 4.5G or LTE will have faster phones, better connection, more solid connections, just because a lot of traffic, especially like in the IoT space, can work either on like 3G or 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I can't remember the timeline. When did 4G roll out? That's been a few years at least, hasn't it?
It's all alphabet soup to me.
Yeah.
So back in, God, I want to say it was like 2006 or 2007. That was when 3G came out, because that's when the iPhone came out. And 4G came along a couple of years after that. So I want to say, I'm guessing 2008, 2009. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
For those of you at home watching, don't quote me on that.
Calling fake news.
Yeah,
don't call me fake news.
It'll be Adam is fake news on the next episode, I think.
Hashtag Adam is fake news. Trending.
And next on ADAM News.
Yes.
Yep. Well, I don't know much about the cell phone stuff. I mean, you were talking about outages and that. Like, how many times has the internet gone out? I have noticed in my life that if the Wi-Fi doesn't work or something, like I'm immediately angry. If I want to be, watching a YouTube video or something, it's, like, do I live in the Stone Age? And then, then I try to check myself and be like, Jim, you were alive in the 90s.
You can handle it, kiddo.
You can handle it, yeah.
Yeah, we used to play basketball and
That's right, yeah.
play with sticks. You can survive this.
I got started on the Super Nintendo. I think
Amen
I can. I can handle this one.
Well, and in to your defense, honestly, we use the internet in general for everything. Well, everything. There's no rest of that sentence. Banking, 100% online. I have one check that I write every month because I'm too lazy to sign up for their, automatic transfer thing. It's a bank out in Sioux Falls. But other than that, we use the internet for absolutely everything.
Right.
Connecting, communicating with people. And so yeah, if our Wi-Fi doesn't work, if we don't have cellular, it can bring things to a screeching halt, which is, every business period is in that category right now. When their primary internet connection goes down, they literally cannot do business, or they're paying people to sit on their ass for 1 to 8 hours because they can't function because there's no internet. So you're not the only one getting pissed that your internet's gone out. Which is, it's another reason why 5G is important, and that the ability to connect without relying on just your Mediacoms of the world, which I believe Mediacom and Frontier were maybe two of the most hated internet service providers in the United States. Maybe it wasn't Mediacom, maybe it was Comcast or something like that, but
wouldn't surprise me if Mediacom was at least in the conversation.
Well, I think they're all pretty competitive in that regard.
Yeah, I suppose it would be, if you were a cable company or an internet provider or something, it would probably be pretty hard to have good reviews, I suppose. I don't know. Because
people don't complain. People don't make comments when they're happy. They only make comments when they're pissed.
Yeah, exactly. And you expect it to work, and as long as it works, no bad comments would be success.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Way, now this is going way back. When I worked at MetLife Financial Services in Des Moines, we had talked about customer satisfaction. And when you're happy, you may tell 5 or 6 people. And they won't tell anybody else. You're telling 5 or 6 people, and that's kind of where it ends. When you're pissed off about something, when something doesn't go your way, you're telling 11 people, and those 11 people are telling 7 others. And when you do the math there, bad news travels a heck of a lot faster than good news when it comes to customer service.
But does bad news travel as fast as fake news?
Hell no.
Yeah.
Indeed. I see we have a shooting.
Uh-oh. Where's that?
5 dead after shooting spree in Louisiana.
Oofda.
Just kind of pulling that up here. I suppose we're going to be talking gun control here pretty soon.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
Let's see.
That must be real current.
Super current. Yeah, like breaking news, as we say right now.
Let me see if I can find it quick.
Manhunt is underway in Louisiana following a string of shootings that left the suspect's parents and 3 others dead. 21-year-old Dakota Theriot after 2 Saturday morning shootings in Livingston Parish. Really?
I've been corrected. I'm sorry. I'm going to rewind a little bit. June 4th of 2010 is when 4G was released.
Okay.
So I was only off by a year and a half.
You were in the ballpark.
Sue me.
You were in the ballpark. I won't be mad at you for that. Okay.
And of course, we see his face.
So how do you guys feel about that?
Well, I'm surprised they put it up here already.
Yeah.
So he's what age? 7.
I don't know. Something happened here.
21 years old. So it's easier to put not minors.
There we go. Okay.
Not minors photos up there.
Oh, he looks like an angsty teen.
Yeah. Of course, he's white, so we're gonna be on that train for a while.
So does it say what kind of gun he used?
No.
I'm looking.
I haven't found that yet.
Domestic violence. So it sounds, by that it sounds like it was a domestic altercation that escalated, which it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Accused of killing if he starts off with his parents, if he's 21.
Illegal use of weapons.
So he has been charged already.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Okay, so the kid was kicked out of his home, was pissed off, went back and shot his folks and some other people in the process.
Apparently. I wonder what drugs he was on. I wonder what prescription antidepressants he was on. Do you think we'll hear anything about that?
I wonder.
No, because they pay the news outlets to. Well, never mind.
I don't know if that's. I mean, it's tragic. It is. It's stuff that shouldn't happen.
But it's
I don't
like,
know if I even want to talk about it.
I mean, can you legislate against craziness though? I mean,
You can't. No, you can't legislate against crazy, and especially when you're legislating in a way that avoids having to deal with mentally ill people, and you're cutting funding left and right. What the hell do you expect? Yeah, people are going to go crazy, and they're going to do shit. The only way to fix that incident is, well, and of course we're speculating because the news is going to tell us if he's been on antidepressants. They're not going to tell us if he's seen treatment. They're not going to tell us if he's on drugs yet.
I bet they'll tell us if he's a Trump supporter.
I'll bet they will too, and I'll bet you they'll tell us if he used an assault rifle, which I'm guessing he didn't because he probably have killed more people.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if they found him with an AR-15 or something, you think that would be in the headline?
But here again, the problem with having news at your fingertips like this is we hear about every single one of these incidents. Mm-hmm. We hear every time there's a shooting, every time somebody dies because of a gun. It's automatically thrown up in the news. Whereas the murder rate is down now compared to where they were 10 years ago. Gun violence is down. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go so far as to say, well, it's a shooting, and so the liberal media is jumping all over it. They think it's legitimate news. That is news. It's interesting. It's tragic. I hope it doesn't initiate a conversation about gun control any more than anything else does.
Yeah, I mean it always does. I mean it seems whenever there's like a mass shooting, it seems like the gun control debate pops up.
I wonder why they focus on this as opposed to who knows how many shootings occurred in Chicago today. Right. Why this versus that? I don't know. And the other thing I was thinking of is I heard something interesting on a podcast about, I think it was a Rogan show, who was talking about okay, we need to keep guns out of the hands of crazy people or mentally ill people. That seems great. That's a great one-liner statement to make. Everybody supports that, of course. I do. The problem is, how do you draw the line there? Is somebody who says they're depressed no longer able to get a firearm?
Right.
Well, let's answer your first question first.
Yeah.
The reason we don't hear about stuff in Chicago is because that is crime typically of minorities against minorities. We hear about this because he's a white kid. Yeah. He's a white male. And the news is reported differently for people like that than the people in Chicago that are shooting each other up.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your...
second part was mentally ill
folks. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
You can't defend against the guy who snaps. You can't defend against the Michael Douglas falling down movie scenario.
Yep.
I'm sure you are familiar with that, where the guy just has a bad day and just goes... Great movie. I encourage you to watch it if you haven't seen it. It's fantastic. Great Michael Douglas movie. You're welcome, Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
You can't defend against people who snap. There's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
But people who have been regularly been in an inpatient facility or committed against their will, then yeah, but those people already can't purchase firearms. They can't get concealed carry permits.
Right.
They're already in a database of some kind. But I think maybe the bigger question in terms of mentally ill and weapons is, how are we treating people? They're going to their medical doctor, who is not a psychiatrist, who is not a psychologist, and saying, I'm depressed, and they're given
pills.
Yeah, okay, well, tell me if it doesn't make you feel better in 3 weeks. Well, that's not how you treat depression.
Yeah.
That's not how you treat people who are borderline psychotic. That's not how you treat people with dissociative identity disorders. but we don't take the time to recognize people that need help and help them in the way that they need.
Right.
Oh.
Drop the mic.
What? Yeah. What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to just
No,
put the
that's
nail in
fine.
that coffin.
What's the answer to that? Like, what? Okay, so how do you guys respond to somebody that just wants common sense gun control legislation?
What does that mean?
Well, common sense is not the same for me as it is for a lot of people I know in Madison. Their idea of gun control is only the military having weapons. Well, the problem with that is in our Constitution, in the Second Amendment, the reason that we have the right to carry guns is to be able to protect ourselves against our government. That's the sole purpose of the Second Amendment. I don't care what any asshole wants to spin that as. The purpose of that Second Amendment is for us to be able to protect ourselves against the government. When we talk about...
But it's about a militia, Adam.
Yeah, right. That's old. We can change the Constitution.
No, we can't change the Constitution, damn it. That's the way it's written. That's the way it was intended. That's the way it will forever will be. Well, that is until, we become, communists and fascists.
But it's about a militia, and they're only talking about muskets.
So let's talk about a well-regulated militia. Let's talk about what a militia was in 1774, 75, 76, 77, 78. A well-regulated militia is the farmer down the street who is in a group of other farmers and other people in his community that have the right to own and bear arms to protect themselves, their country, whatever they need to, protect themselves against their government if need be.
Yeah.
Now, that's what a militia was in the 1775, 76, 77. When they were drafting, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and, having the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, that was their militia. That was their army. That was, Ridge Road.
Yeah.
Which is, where we live, me and Jimmy and Kevin, we are responsible for our defense.
But we have an army now, though, so, that's what we can use to defend us.
Did both of you grow up with firearms, with guns?
Yes.
Yeah. I grew up hunting.
Yeah. See, I didn't. The Grem's household wasn't particularly, we didn't care about that kind of stuff. I mean, my dad had some, muskets and stuff, but it was mostly for, show and, display type of stuff. So we never really grew up around it. I respect firearms. I think the Second Amendment should be promoted and protected. But at the same time, I'm not someone who would say, I got to have an AR-15 or I have to own an anti-aircraft weaponry. And so, when you say common sense gun regulation, I would think, well, can we actually own, an anti-tank artillery? Where is the line as far as that goes?
I'm not an expert in all of the gun legislation and stuff, but I've never heard of anything like that.
So I think we have about as much common sense with our gun legislation as we need. I think we're kind of in the sweet spot. If you want to walk over to Shields and purchase a firearm right now, you have to wait 30 days unless you have a concealed carry permit. What does that mean to have a concealed carry permit? Well, it means that I have given all of my information to my local authorities. They have run my name. I have one. They've run my name through the FBI database. They've run my name through Interpol. They've run my name through all of these places to see if I have any kind of a criminal background. And if I don't have any kind of a criminal background and I check out okay, then yeah, I have, after I complete 10 hours of coursework and a shooting demonstration, then I can carry a gun. I think that we have a lot of common sense with the way that our gun laws are structured right now. And as much as I don't like the NRA, I think that they do have a lot of experts who have helped our legislators construct gun laws in a responsible manner.
I was listening to a podcast. Speaking of the NRA, they were talking about how back in the day, in public schools, the NRA used to come and do firearm education in schools and hand out pamphlets and gun safety sheets and all that stuff. Can you imagine that happening today?
No, I
Holy
can't.
cow!
Yeah.
Maybe around here it wouldn't be so out of the question. But,
yeah, I suppose it would depend on
region.
I doubt you could get away with that in Parkland.
Yeah. Right.
Anna, this is all unfolding in southeast Louisiana, not far from Baton Rouge.
I can't stop it. Okay.
So when we talk about muskets, well, yeah, but that was intended for muskets. I liked your comment because if you've seen what gets shot out of a musket, how big of a projectile that really is.
Yeah.
A lead ball that's this big around. It's a lot bigger than a bullet, and you can be just as accurate with a rifle as a rifle at 200 yards with a musket.
Mm-hmm.
As you can, one of today's high power rifles. So they're a hell of a lot more deadly, or the potential to be more deadly than our handguns do from a single projectile standpoint.
Do you guys think that the problem with the gun debate is that there's too much like misinformation? Because I've heard people say, well, what about like why should somebody be able to have a machine gun, or why do people need an assault rifle? Or,
the naming.
So let's get rid of that assault rifle fucking thing right now, because it's not an assault rifle. An AR is an Armalite rifle. Right?
Yeah,
Armalite was the original manufacturer of the weapon that had interchangeable components, and that was the AR.
Yeah.
And I know you use the term just because that's the term that's used nowadays. But yeah, the second that you answer that, I move my microphone so I can talk with my hands because I really. But the second that you asked that question, the first thing that popped in my head was ignorance.
Yeah.
Ignorance by far and away is the worst part of that conversation. So many people who don't know what they're talking about are talking completely out of school. Like Joe Biden saying, "Hey, you want to, take a double barrel shotgun outside and fire 2 shots in the air." Well, he's going to wait for you to, finish shooting your 2 shots, and then you're going to get shot in the stomach, and somebody's going to go inside and steal your shit.
Yeah.
And people don't know the difference between, semi-automatic and fully automatic. That gets lost in the discussion too.
Yeah. It might be a fully semi-automatic.
Oh my gosh. So my pearls.
For those of you out of the know, a semi-automatic rifle just means that when you pull the trigger, it goes bang.
Yeah.
An automatic rifle, you hold down the trigger, and it keeps going bang. Bang, 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 bang. As opposed to bang, bang, bang.
I've heard military folks talk about fully automatic weapons and how incredibly inaccurate they are too. So, how useful would it be anyway?
Yeah. I suppose the amount of recoil
just the spray
throws the barrel all over the place.
Well, if you try to shoot an Uzi, you're not going to hold it here and shoot, 30 shots in 2 seconds at somebody. Your arm's going to go.
I've been playing a lot of Doom lately. That's not true.
Well, and that
exactly there.
People think that video games. I'm sure that maybe plays a factor in the conversation too. Well, yeah, I shoot a gun in a video game, so I know what guns are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always use the example of I've played shooters and violent video games my whole life. I've only fired an actual gun maybe twice. One of the times was at a Isaac Walton here in town, and it was some junior thing that I was invited to, and it was clay pigeons, and I hit like 19 out of 20 targets, not having fired a weapon before. And my only logical explanation of that is video games and first-person shooters.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you an idea of how to aim and how to lead.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah.
And it's also funny how the left will blame the NRA for the gun violence, and the NRA blames the video games, and it just kind of goes full circle.
I don't entirely disagree with the NRA.
No, I don't
in that regard. We become so, or there's the ability to become so desensitized to it. Now, we say we play violent video games our whole life. A violent video game when we were young was Duck Hunt.
Exactly.
You fire at the screen, and the duck goes and falls to the ground, and then the dog picks it up and jumps and got it. But so violent video games now is you shoot somebody in the head, their head goes boom, you see pink mist everywhere, and so kids get desensitized to what that's like, and so they don't have any problem with that in real life. Or at least there's the serious potential for that to be the case.
And I'm not up on the Call of Duties and that kind of stuff, like whatever the kids are doing now with the
Call of Duty's not too bad.
The shooter games, but I would imagine with the graphics and stuff the way they could be now, I'd imagine it could get pretty gory.
If you guys are familiar with Mortal Kombat, that is stuff I won't even go near. It's so realistic and just so it's so creative in how you can kill each other in those games. It's ridiculous. Yes. I was encouraged, though, by the sheer amount of people who are into like Minecraft and those kind of creative games that make you think about what you're doing, and that was kind of encouraging to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you go into a world and you build and you construct.
Construct instead of destruct.
When we were little kids, we'd go into the woods and we would find stuff and we would construct forts and we'd build little villages out of sticks and stones, and these kids are doing that in the same way, but it's on a digital platform. Which, I mean, it's a shame that they're not having the tactile feel of that experience, but that's essentially what they're doing. I think.
Still kind of using that same part of the brain, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a look at these things and see what I can make.
Right.
I'd like to ask both you guys a question. I mean, Adam, something you said made me think of this, but I was listening to something recently, and they said a lot of the issues with kids these days is that somewhere along the line, with parenting, the idea of like unsupervised free play fell off the map, and it was like you had the idea of the helicopter parent and stuff. Adam, your son's older than Kevin, your daughter, but what do you guys think about that? I mean, Adam, you and I would go take off in the ravine and be gone for hours and whatever, and it just was just how it was. Mm-hmm. And but the idea was that time spent, when you're just unsupervised as a kid, allows the kids to, negotiate with each other and work things out, and it's like prepares you sort of for conflict in your adulthood and like how to come up with a solution to,
I don't know. I mean, I think I punched Cole Beardsley once, and that wasn't exactly a good resolution of conflict in our playtime. Sorry about that, Cole. I still feel bad, buddy. But I agree with you. I think that is lost among a lot of parents that I see. Now, my son isn't with me, full time. He spends time between myself and his mother in Rochester, and he goes off with his friends, and they get a little bike gang, and they will go to the park and they'll play. So, I mean, I know he has that interaction. That's something that I'm very encouraging of. But I see a lot of parents who do the opposite. Hey, I want to know where you are at every single minute of your life, and so the kid will say, okay, I'll stay home and plays video games.
Yeah.
And so he's, getting that unsupervised free time, but he's spending it, attached to a computer screen or a video screen, and not in a constructive way. They're, killing Russians in Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of related, which is, I was listening to some radio show, and they were talking about how, like, we in kind of rural Northwest Iowa maybe would see it as more normal if, like, my kids went out hunting together in the woods. Whatever age is appropriate for that. That's normal here. That's good. That's fine. And then like New York City, it's normal for kids to like ride the subway home unattended, where we might think that can be like totally outrageous. Like, you let your kid ride a subway home in New York City? Well, and they would say, you let your kids go out in the woods together hunting?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of like context sensitive and where you are geographically.
Yeah.
Sort of interesting.
Huh.
But I saw that actually. I would... when we were in New York, I'd see, a couple kids, young kids together walking down the street, and you know what they were going. That's the world that they live in. And when you grow up in that world, and when you grow up exposed to that, and you see where the dangers are, would I let my kid do that in the city? Hell no. Would I let him go out with his friends in the woods? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here in New York City feels the same way. I'll let my kids go out or walk around the city, but there's no way I'm letting them in the woods.
Yeah, a bear might get him or something.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's just it's the way that there's an intelligent way to put it, and I'm not going to put it that way. I'm just going to say, because I can't think of it right now. But it's just where they're raised and how they're raised.
I suppose.
What's your normal?
Well, Kevin, maybe.
Well, what is your normal?
Maybe you could like chime in on this, being a college teacher. But the argument that the guy was making on this thing that I listened to was that the kids that are in college now are like the first generation of these kids where the parents really started to helicopter them and they took away the free. And so they get into the college world and they're like unprepared to deal with somebody with a dissenting opinion or something like that. And then the idea is that these are the kids that need the safe spaces and the trigger warnings and all that kind of thing. And like this fellow argued that there was all these sort of things coming together at once to create this wild atmosphere in the university where the kids are like porcelain dolls or something, and they can't.
And see a lot of that just in my institution. It's just not something we have to deal with.
Sure.
But I will say that, like, to some extent, I'm going to kick it down that can here to Kyle, who's not with us due to paternity leave.
Oh, yeah.
As you can see, Kyle is fake news.
Yep.
To some extent, I think he would agree with me, actually, that it's like the kids in high school, they're not used to, like, failing. They're not used to failing a class and having to redo stuff. Well,
it's because they were given trophies for last place in flag football.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And how far back does that go? I don't know, but when they get to college, sometimes it's like a big shock to people when they realize that I'm not going to pass every single class that I spent a semester learning in or paid for, even. And that's the other thing. There's a cost factor in college that they're not ready for either. And there's all this argument about, like, should we be exposing kids who are 18 out of high school to this lifetime of debt that they're going to get into as well.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. We could go on for
student loan
thing. Yeah,
that's subject for another night. But
I've got a story that I like to tell sometimes that relates to this. That Adam, you'll know the characters, but it was, I think, maybe my first semester at Iowa State, and I was walking around, and it was one of those. Think like a Westboro Baptist Church type of a screaming at people like you're killing babies and whatever kind of.
We had those at UNI too.
Yeah, just a sort of an obnoxious protester guy waving a picket sign thing around and screaming at people and whatever. And I said to Derek Lester, walking around with me, and I'm like, man, that kind of is lame. Why are they letting this guy, talk and yell at the students and stuff? They should shut him up. And Derek said, well, Jim, it's free speech. You just go tell him to shut up yourself.
Yeah.
And that was a big turning point for me, sort of in like, oh yeah, I guess, that's how that works. Yeah. So
it's your awakening.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it took me, of course, years.
Yeah.
And then a law school education to sort of get some of the nuances of that free speech stuff. But it was an important lesson, I think, and I was, glad to be exposed to that because you get thicker skin as a result. It's like, you learn what to ignore, you learn what to pick your battles. I mean, so what? Say whatever you want to. I don't care. Fine. Maybe I'll respond to you. Maybe I won't.
Or maybe you'll learn something too if you hear from a dissenting opinion. I mean, he sounds nuts standing and shouting at you guys, but maybe there's some kernel of truth buried in there somewhere that you haven't considered yet.
Right.
And that's just like being intellectually honest with yourself and saying, okay, I think I believe this and I accept these truths, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's another opinion or another way of thinking about something. And if there isn't, maybe I'm just strengthening my own beliefs, my own positions.
Well, and I think that the art of, and I'm going to call it an art because I think it is the art of thinking about it that way, is getting kind of lost. The art of debate, the art of conversation.
Yeah.
The art of, hey, I feel this way and I feel this way. Let's have a conversation about it and let's legitimately talk about how we feel and why we feel that way, because that's the way that we grow. And right now, in our culture, we don't do that.
Yeah, I agree. It's I'm always of the mindset that sort of an adversarial, and I say that sort of softly, like not headbutting exactly, but what you're describing, Adam, is just fleshing out. Let's let the best argument win the day. Absolutely. And then come into a conversation open to having your mind change. Because if you don't, then what's the point in even having the discussion in the first place? So
so many times it just devolves into name calling.
Right. Ad hominems. That sort
it devolves into CNN breaking news.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we're maybe coming full circle on the news thing, but I do feel like there's a constituency out there, people who want long form discussions and legitimate intellectual conversation. I mean,
sign me up. I'll be the first.
Podcasts are a great venue for that. I mean, it's stuff that you just can't do with mainstream news, where there's a break every 6 minutes or something. You got to cut to commercials for the latest, antidepressant medication. But anyway, how are we feeling?
Feeling pretty good.
Did we get to our?
Yeah.
Should we wrap it up?
This is good. Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks everybody for listening. And check us out online. Again, we're at projectionpodcast.home.blog. We are still live, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. On iTunes, search for us, Project Ion Podcast. On YouTube, we're Project Ion Podcast. Email us at, guess what? projectionpodcast@gmail.com. We've been brought to you today by Shep's PC Repair for all your PC repair needs.
Yep.
This is Kevin.
Adam.
And
I'm Jim. Okay, we can play some outro music.
Later.
Awesome.
That
was awesome.
Okay, here we go.